They called me Maya's embarrassing refugee uncle at the engagement party. Not to my face, of course. I was serving tea in my modest Queens apartment when I overheard Ethan Bradley whispering to his Princeton friends. Maya's family has some complications. Her uncle fled Syria with nothing but a suitcase, real charity case. His mother, Patricia, nodded approvingly. How generous of Maya to maintain those connections. I didn't correct them. Didn't mention that the nothing in my suitcase was a collection of rare Byzantine jewelry worth $89 million today. That this refugee had been one of Damascus's most successful antiquities dealers before the war. That my charity case status was the perfect cover for building a new empire in America. 15 years of playing the struggling immigrant. 15 years of watching people's true character emerge when they think you have nothing. Tonight, Maya's wedding reception would reveal exactly who the Bradley family really was. And I couldn't wait to show them what happens when you underestimate the quiet man in the corner. Let me tell you how we got here. How my beautiful niece became engaged to someone who saw her family as an embarrassment to be managed. Damascus, 2009. The bombs were getting closer to the old city. I had maybe 3 hours before the military moved into our quarter. 15 minutes to choose what mattered most from 30 years of collecting. Most people grab photos, documents, cash. I grabbed something different. In my basement vault, behind temperature-controlled glass, sat my life's work. Byzantine jewelry from the 6th through the 12th centuries, pieces that belonged in museums, pieces that would have funded a small country. The crowned eagle fibula from Emperor Justinian's court, the pearl and sapphire pendant that once hung around Empress Theodora's neck. 7 pieces total, each worth more than most people see in a lifetime, each small enough to hide in the false bottom of an old leather suitcase. My brother Ahmed was waiting with his family. "Yusuf, hurry! The checkpoint closes in an hour." I sealed the jewelry in custom-fitted foam compartments, covered them with old clothes, family photos, the mundane possessions of a man fleeing war. Ahmed never asked what was in the suitcase. In times like that, everyone carries their own secrets. The journey to America took 8 months. Refugee camps in Jordan, processing centers in Germany, interviews with immigration officials who looked at us like we might explode at any moment. I kept the suitcase close, never checking it, never letting it out of my sight. When we finally reached New York, Ahmed's wife, Fatima, cried at the Statue of Liberty. "We made it, Yusuf. We're safe." I nodded and smiled, but my mind was on the suitcase, on the fortune hidden inches from immigration officers who saw only another desperate refugee, on the plan that was already forming. The Bronx apartment was small, 2 bedrooms for 6 people. Ahmed's family took 1 room, I took the other. The suitcase went under my bed, wrapped in old blankets, looking like the luggage of a man who owned nothing else. I found work at Mahmoud's falafel shop on Steinway Street. $8 an hour, cash under the table, no questions asked. Perfect cover for a man who needed to blend in, to appear exactly as broken as everyone expected. For 6 months, I played the part perfectly. Took the subway to work, came home exhausted, complained about American customers who couldn't pronounce hummus. Ahmed worried about me. "Brother, you were somebody in Damascus. Here, you're nobody." Exactly where I wanted to be. In month 7, I took my first piece to Christie's auction house, not to sell, just to authenticate. The appraiser, a pale man named Richardson, studied the crowned eagle fibula under magnification for 20 minutes. "Where did you acquire this?" His voice was careful, professional. "Family heirloom, very old. My grandfather's grandfather, maybe." Richardson set down his loupe. "Sir, This is a museum-quality Byzantine piece. 6th century imperial court provenance. Are you certain about the ownership history? I played confused, uncertain. Is worth something? Something. Richardson's hands were shaking. This piece could sell for $12 to $15 million. I acted shocked, overwhelmed. The poor refugee discovering he owned treasure. Richardson arranged private authentication through the Metropolitan Museum's Byzantine department. Clean provenance, no flags in international databases. The chaos of war had erased paper trails, but the craftsmanship spoke for itself. 6 weeks later, I sold the fibula for $14.2 million. The Bradley family first met me 3 years ago at Maya's college graduation. Columbia University, where my brilliant niece had earned her MBA while working 2 jobs to support her family. I was proud of her. This girl who'd arrived in America at age 12, speaking no English, and was now graduating summa cum laude. Ethan Bradley caught her attention during orientation week. Old Connecticut money, trust fund baby, father in private equity, mother on the boards of 3 different charities, the kind of family that valued pedigree over character. I wore my best thrift store suit to graduation. Let them see exactly what they expected. The struggling uncle who'd somehow scraped together enough for a Metro card to Manhattan. Maya introduced us after the ceremony. Ethan, this is my Uncle Yusuf. He's been like a father to me since we came to America. Ethan's handshake was weak, distracted. Nice to meet you, sir. Maya talks about you often. His eyes had already moved past me, scanning for more important connections. I was furniture to him, background scenery in Maya's life. But I watched him carefully, watched how he interacted with Maya's parents, with her younger siblings. Polite but distant, like he was studying foreign customs he'd have to tolerate for the sake of the relationship. At the graduation dinner, I sat at the far end of the table while Ethan's parents held court. Patricia Bradley, perfectly coiffed and dripping with subtle wealth, dominated the conversation. Maya, dear, you simply must visit our house in the Hamptons this summer, though I suppose it might be quite different from what you're used to. The comment landed like a small slap. Maya smiled gracefully, but I saw the hurt flash across her face. I'd love to see it, Mrs. Bradley. Wonderful. We'll have to introduce you to our friends. They'll find your background so interesting. Interesting, like Maya was an exotic pet to be displayed for entertainment. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. But I'd heard enough to begin forming my assessment of the Bradley family. Wealth without wisdom, privilege without empathy, the kind of people who measured worth by accident of birth rather than strength of character. Over the next 3 years, I watched Ethan and Maya's relationship develop while I continued my own transformation. The second Byzantine piece, Emperor Constantine's ceremonial ring, sold for $11.8 million. The third, a sapphire and gold diadem, brought $16.3 million at Sotheby's. By 2022, my portfolio was worth $89 million. Real estate in Manhattan, investments in blue-chip stocks, a legitimate antiquities consulting business that served as cover for my wealth. But to everyone who mattered, I remained poor Uncle Yusuf, the refugee who worked at the falafel shop. Maya and Ethan announced their engagement last Christmas. The ring was impressive, 2 carats, probably cost him $40,000. Maya was radiant, genuinely happy, talking about their future together. That's when I decided to conduct my final test. I started attending more family gatherings, making myself more visible in Maya's social circle. At Ethan's birthday party in February, I brought homemade baklava and sat quietly in the corner, observing. "This is delicious," one of Ethan's investment banker friends said, tasting the pastry. "Did you make this?" "Yes, family recipe, from Damascus. Wow, so authentic. It's like having a real refugee experience right here in Manhattan. A real refugee experience. Like I was a cultural exhibit at a museum. Patricia Bradley approached me later that evening. Yusuf, I've been meaning to ask. Will you be comfortable at the wedding? It's quite a formal affair, very traditional American ceremony. I understand formal. In Syria, we had many beautiful weddings. Oh, I'm sure you did. But this will be different. Ethan's friends are quite sophisticated, judges, senators, business leaders. They might not understand your background. There it was. The polite way of saying I didn't belong. Maya is my family. Of course I come to wedding. Patricia's smile was strained. Of course, dear. We just want everyone to be comfortable. The engagement party in March was where the mask finally slipped. The Bradleys had rented a private room at the Union Club, Old Money's favorite playground. Maya looked stunning in her navy dress, Ethan handsome in his tailored suit. I arrived wearing my best clothes, a 10-year-old department store suit, scuffed shoes, the uniform of a man who couldn't afford better. Perfect camouflage. The Bradley side of the room was a showcase of American aristocracy. Lawyers, bankers, politicians, all clustered around open bars and servers carrying champagne. Maya's family huddled near the entrance, clearly out of place in this temple of privilege. I found myself alone near the coat check, nursing a ginger ale and watching the social dynamics play out. That's when I overheard the conversation that would change everything. Ethan, darling, are you certain about this marriage? Patricia Bradley's voice carried across the room to where her son stood with his Princeton roommates. Mom, we've talked about this. I love Maya. I know you do, dear. But love isn't everything. Marriage is about compatibility, about families joining together. These people, she gestured toward Maya's relatives, they're just so different. Different how? Well, look at them. That uncle with his refugee story, constantly reminding everyone about his tragic past. Maya's parents with their limited English, their foreign customs, and don't get me started on the smell of their cooking. The smell of their cooking. Like our heritage was something offensive to be endured. Ethan's friend, Marcus, a hedge fund analyst, joined the conversation. Dude, you could marry anyone. Why complicate your life with all this cultural baggage? Maya's worth it. Is she, though? Patricia's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Have you thought about children? About what kind of life you want to build? These people don't understand our world, our values. They'll always be outsiders. These people, as if we were a different species. Plus, Marcus added, think about the financial burden. Maya's family clearly expects support. That uncle looks like he hasn't bought new clothes in a decade. Are you prepared to be responsible for all of them? I set down my ginger ale carefully, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Maya's not like that, Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya's lovely, Patricia agreed, but she comes with complications. Family obligations, cultural expectations, language barriers at every gathering. Is that really what you want for your future? They're good people, Mom. I'm sure they are, dear. But good people aren't always the right people. You have a responsibility to your family name, to your future children. Do you want them growing up confused about their identity? Half American, half whatever Maya's family is? Whatever Maya's family is. 15 centuries of Byzantine heritage, poetry, mathematics, architecture that built empires, reduced to whatever. That's when Ethan said the words that sealed his fate. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should reconsider some things. I walked home to Queens that night planning something I'd never planned before. Not just wealth accumulation or business strategy, but something far more satisfying: justice. The wedding invitation arrived in April. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, the kind of stationery that screamed expensive taste. Maya had delivered it personally, glowing with excitement. "Uncle Yusuf, I wanted you to be one of the first to see it. Isn't it beautiful?" It was beautiful, and it was wrong. The ceremony was scheduled for the Plaza Hotel, one of New York's most prestigious venues. Black tie required. The invitation included a small card with dress code guidelines and a subtle note about maintaining the elegant atmosphere of this special day. What it didn't include was my name. "Maya Habibti, I don't see my name on guest list." Her face fell slightly. "Oh, that's just an oversight. Of course you're invited. Ethan's mother is handling the final list. I'll call her right away." But she didn't call right away. And when she finally did, 3 days later, her voice was different, smaller. "Uncle Yusuf, there's been a complication with the guest list. The venue has strict capacity limits. Ethan's family has so many business obligations, people they have to invite for professional reasons. I understand, big family, many friends. It's not that we don't want you there. It's just complicated. Complicated. The same word Patricia Bradley had used to describe us. Maya? What did they say exactly?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, I could hear tears in her voice. "Mrs. Bradley said the wedding is about starting fresh, building a new life. She thinks it might be better if we keep things simple, just immediate family." "I am immediate family." "I know, I told her that, but she said maybe it would be easier for everyone if we had a separate celebration later. Something more comfortable for our side of the family. A separate celebration. The separate but equal reception for the undesirable relatives." "What did Ethan say?" Another long pause. "He said he wants everyone to be happy, that maybe his mother has a point about keeping things manageable." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, but something sharper. Clarity. "Maya, do you know what your grandmother used to say? A man who is ashamed of his family today will be ashamed of his wife tomorrow. Uncle Yusuf, that's not fair. Ethan loves me." "Does he love all of you? Or just the parts that fit his world?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my banker at Chase Private Client Services. The second was to my public relations consultant, a woman who specialized in reputation management for high-net-worth individuals. The third was to Maya. "Habibti, I want you to know something. Whatever happens at your wedding, I love you. You will always be my family." "What do you mean, whatever happens?" "Sometimes people need to learn hard lessons about respect, about what family really means." "Uncle Yusuf, you're scaring me." "Don't be scared, my dear. Be proud. You come from a family of survivors, of fighters. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I hung up and opened the old suitcase under my bed. 5 pieces remained of my original 7. The Empress Theodora pendant, the ceremonial chalice of Saint Sophia, the golden palm frond of imperial triumph. $89 million in history, in survival, in the strength of people who'd built empires while the Bradleys' ancestors were still living in mud huts. Tomorrow, the Bradley family would learn exactly who they'd chosen to exclude from their perfect wedding. The morning of Maya's wedding, I woke at 5 a.m. in my Queens apartment. Through my window, I could see the subway tracks where I'd taken countless rides to maintain my cover. Today would be the last day I'd need this elaborate disguise. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Maya, all from last night. I listened to the voicemails over coffee. "Uncle Yusuf, please call me back. I talked to Ethan about the wedding list. He says maybe we can work something out." The next message, 2 hours later. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what you said, about Ethan being ashamed. That's not true, is it?" The final message, recorded at 3:17 a.m. "Uncle, I need you to know something. Even if you can't come to the ceremony, you're the most important person in my life. You saved us. You gave up everything for our family. I'll never forget that." She was wrong about one thing. I hadn't given up everything. I'd given up the appearance of everything while building something far more powerful underneath. I showered, shaved, and put on my best thrift store clothes one final time. The wedding was at 6 p.m. I had 13 hours to execute a plan 15 years in the making. My first stop was Chase Private Client Services on Park Avenue. Marcus Wellington, my relationship manager, greeted me in the marble lobby. To him, I wasn't the refugee in second-hand clothes. I was a valued client with a 9-figure portfolio. "Mr. Hassan, everything is prepared as you requested. The wire transfers? Ready for execution on your command. Are you certain about the amounts?" I looked at the documents he'd prepared. $25 million to the International Rescue Committee, $20 million to the Syrian Refugee Assistance Programs, $15 million to Columbia University's Scholarship Fund for displaced students, $29 million remaining in liquid assets for what came next. "I'm certain. And the other arrangements?" Marcus handed me a sealed briefcase. Inside, organized in custom-fitted compartments, were the remaining 5 pieces of my Byzantine collection. The Empress Theodora pendant gleamed under the office lighting, its sapphires catching the morning sun streaming through the windows. "The authentication documents from the Metropolitan Museum," Marcus continued. "The provenance reports, the insurance appraisals. Everything you need to prove ownership and value." I closed the briefcase carefully. $89 million in medieval craftsmanship about to make its public debut. "Mr. Hassan, may I ask why now? You've maintained your privacy for 15 years. "Sometimes privacy becomes complicity, Marcus. Sometimes silence enables cruelty. My second stop was the offices of Meridian Strategic Communications, a white-shoe public relations firm that specialized in crisis management for high-net-worth individuals. Sarah Chen, the managing partner, had spent the last month preparing for this day. "We have complete background files on the entire Bradley family," she reported, spreading documents across her conference table. 3 generations of financial records, social connections, business partnerships, philanthropic activities. I studied the files. Patricia Bradley served on the board of the New York Historical Society and chaired the annual Children's Hospital Gala. Ethan worked at his father's private equity firm, managing portfolios for pension funds and university endowments. On paper, they looked like model citizens. "What about the personal details?" Sarah opened a thicker folder. "This is where it gets interesting. The Bradley family fortune comes from defense contracting during World War II. Specifically, they manufactured equipment for military bases. She showed me declassified documents from the National Archives. In 1943, Bradley Industries had a government contract to build temporary housing for displaced persons camps in Europe. Refugee camps, essentially. The irony was exquisite. The Bradley family had built their wealth housing refugees, and now they were ashamed to associate with one. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Patricia Bradley's great-grandfather, Harrison Bradley, was investigated by Congress in 1947 for profiteering from refugee assistance programs. He was never charged, but the Senate committee's report describes unconscionable price gouging of desperate people fleeing war. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the historical parallel. They built their American dream on the backs of people like me. It gets worse. In 1962, the Bradley Foundation applied for tax-exempt status as a charitable organization. Their stated mission was providing humanitarian aid to displaced persons and immigrants seeking refuge in America. Sarah handed me another document. They received their tax exemption and have been filing returns for 60 years. But look at their actual charitable giving. The numbers told the story. The Bradley Foundation had assets of $47 million, but gave away less than 2% annually, the minimum required to maintain tax-exempt status. None of it went to refugee assistance. They've been using refugee charity as a tax shelter while discriminating against actual refugees. That's correct. And here's the final piece. Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a social media archive. Patricia Bradley's Facebook posts from 2015 to 2017 during the Syrian refugee crisis. I read her public statements with growing disbelief. Posts supporting border restrictions, complaints about cultural assimilation, fears about security risks from Middle Eastern immigrants, the same language politicians use to justify turning away people like my family. She was actively campaigning against Syrian refugee resettlement while sitting on the board of a supposed refugee charity. Yes, and Mr. Hassan, there's something else you should know about tonight's wedding venue. The Plaza Hotel had been built in 1907 with financing from several prominent New York families, including the Bradleys. But what Sarah had discovered went deeper than real estate investment. In 1925, the Plaza was the site of the first National Immigration Reform Conference, a gathering of wealthy Americans who wanted to restrict immigration from undesirable countries. She showed me newspaper clippings from the New York Times archives. The conference was sponsored by the American Eugenics Society and hosted by Harrison Bradley, Patricia's great-grandfather. They spent 3 days discussing ways to prevent inferior races from diluting American stock. The same hotel where Maya was marrying into this family had been the birthplace of policies designed to keep people like us out of America. The conference recommendations became the basis for the Immigration Act of 1924, which banned virtually all immigration from Asia and the Middle East for 40 years. I stared at the historical documents, understanding now that tonight's exclusion was part of a pattern spanning generations. The Bradleys hadn't just excluded me from one wedding. Their family had spent a century excluding entire populations from American life. Sarah, I want all of this prepared for immediate release. Full documentation, historical context, contemporary relevance. Are your media contacts ready? Standing by. We have producers at CNN, The New York Times, Washington Post, and 60 Minutes all prepared to run stories tonight. The Syrian refugee angle makes this immediately newsworthy. And the social media campaign? Hashtag ready to launch. # refugee revenge will trend within hours of the first post. I looked out Sarah's office window toward Midtown Manhattan, where Maya was probably getting her hair done for the wedding she'd dreamed about since childhood. In 6 hours, that dream would become a nightmare. But sometimes nightmares are necessary to wake people up. My third stop was Bergdorf Goodman, where I had an appointment with personal shopping services. For 15 years, I'd dressed like a man who shopped at thrift stores. Tonight, I needed to look like what I actually was, one of New York's wealthiest individuals. The personal shopper, Elena, had prepared several options: Tom Ford tuxedo, Italian leather shoes, Hermes accessories. The transformation was dramatic. In the mirror, I no longer saw the struggling refugee. I saw a man who belonged in the same social circles as the Bradleys. "Perfect fit, Mr. Hassan. Will you be wearing this to a special event?" "Very special. A wedding where I'm about to make quite an impression. The tuxedo cost $8,000. I paid cash, enjoying the symbolism. I was spending more on one outfit than I'd earned in 6 months at the falafel shop." From Bergdorf's, I took a taxi to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the curator of Byzantine art, was waiting in her office. "Mr. Hassan, it's always a pleasure to see you. Are you ready for tonight's presentation?" Dr. Morrison had been authenticating my pieces for years, but she'd never seen them all together. Today, I opened the briefcase and displayed the complete collection. Her intake of breath was audible. "My God, Yusuf! The entire imperial set! I've never seen anything like this outside of museum archives. Tonight, everyone will see them. Are you certain you want to do this publicly? Once these pieces become known, you'll never have privacy again. Every museum, every collector, every art historian in the world will want to study them. Privacy is a luxury I can no longer afford, Elizabeth. Sometimes bearing witness requires stepping into the light." She nodded, understanding. Dr. Morrison had fled East Germany in 1987. She knew something about the weight of hidden histories. "I'll be there tonight with the documentation. Full provenance, imperial authentication, estimated valuations. The press will have everything they need to verify your claims." By 4 p.m., I was back in Queens, putting the finishing touches on the evening's plan. My apartment, which had served as camouflage for so long, now felt like a costume I was ready to discard. I called Ahmed, my brother, who was working his shift at the grocery store where he'd been employed for 12 years. "Yusuf, how are you feeling about tonight?" "Nervous, but ready. I still don't understand why you kept the money secret from us all these years." "Because I needed to know who people really were, Ahmed. When they thought I had nothing, some showed kindness. Others showed their true nature. Maya's heartbroken about not being able to invite you. She'll understand soon. What are you planning, brother?" I looked at my reflection in the apartment window, seeing both the man I'd been and the man I was about to become. "Justice, Ahmed. I'm planning justice." At 5 p.m., I received a text from Maya. "Uncle, I'm so sorry about everything. I hope someday you'll forgive me." I typed back, "There's nothing to forgive, Habibti. But there's everything to learn." At 5:30, Sarah Chen called with final confirmation. "All systems ready, Mr. Hassan. Media contacts standing by, social media campaign loaded, historical documentation prepared for release. Are you sure you want to proceed?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." At 5:45, I put on the Tom Ford tuxedo and looked at myself one final time in the Queen's apartment mirror. The refugee was gone. In his place stood someone the Bradleys had never expected to meet, the real Yusuf Hassan. I picked up the briefcase containing $89 million in Byzantine artifacts and headed for Manhattan. The Plaza Hotel was 25 minutes away by taxi. Maya's wedding would begin in exactly 1 hour. The Plaza Hotel at sunset was everything Patricia Bradley had promised. Elegant, exclusive, intimidating to anyone who didn't belong. Guests in designer evening wear climbed the marble steps, while photographers captured arrivals for the society pages. I paid my taxi driver and stepped onto Fifth Avenue carrying the briefcase that contained my family's survival and my future plans. The doorman, trained to spot trouble, looked at me with mild concern. Rich people didn't usually arrive at Plaza Hotel weddings in yellow cabs. "Good evening, sir. Are you here for the Bradley Khalil wedding?" "I am." He checked his clipboard. I don't see your name on the guest list. That's because I wasn't invited. His expression shifted from concern to alarm. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to— My name is Yusuf Hassan. I'm the bride's uncle, and I think you should call security now, because what's about to happen will require witnesses. The doorman reached for his radio, but before he could speak, Maya appeared in the hotel lobby. Through the glass doors, I could see her in her wedding dress. Vera Wang silk, probably $15,000, beautiful and radiant and heartbroken. She saw me and ran outside, her dress trailing on the sidewalk. Uncle Yusuf! You came. You look— She stopped, taking in the tuxedo, the confidence, the briefcase. You look different. I am different, Maya. Tonight you're going to see who I really am. What do you mean? I mean the refugee uncle who embarrassed your new family is about to become their worst nightmare. She stared at me, confusion replacing joy. I don't understand. I took her hand gently. You will. But first, I need you to gather everyone in the ballroom. Tell them Maya's uncle has arrived with wedding gifts. Uncle, you're scaring me. Don't be scared, Habibti. Be proud. Tonight, your family reclaims its dignity. The Plaza Hotel's ballroom fell silent as I walked through the doors. 300 guests in designer evening wear turned to stare at the uninvited guest in the Tom Ford tuxedo carrying a mysterious briefcase. Patricia Bradley spotted me first from the head table, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. The color drained from her perfectly made-up face as recognition dawned. This wasn't the struggling refugee uncle she remembered. This was someone else entirely. Ethan stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. What is he doing here? Maya, you said he understood about the guest list. Maya walked beside me, her wedding dress rustling against the marble floor. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my Uncle Yusuf. He has something to share with us tonight. The whispers started immediately. Ethan's Princeton friends exchanged confused glances. Patricia's society friends pulled out their phones, sensing drama worth documenting. The hotel staff positioned themselves near the exits, ready for whatever was about to unfold. I walked to the center of the ballroom, set my briefcase on the floor, and looked around the room. 15 years of planning had led to this moment. 15 years of watching privileged people reveal their true character when they thought I had nothing to lose. Good evening, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. My name is Yusuf Hassan. I'm Maya's uncle, and I apologize for arriving without an invitation. Patricia Bradley found her voice. Mr. Hassan, this is a private celebration. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. In a moment, Mrs. Bradley. But first, I think your guests might be interested in learning a few things about the man you called an embarrassing refugee who doesn't understand your world. The whispers stopped. The room went dead quiet. I opened my briefcase. The first piece I removed was the Empress Theodora pendant. Sapphires and pearls caught the ballroom's crystal lighting, sending blue fire dancing across the walls. Gasps echoed through the crowd as I held up the artifact. This pendant belonged to Empress Theodora, wife of Emperor Justinian, ruler of the Byzantine Empire in the 6th century. It's worth approximately $18 million. I set it carefully on the white tablecloth and reached for the second piece. This is the ceremonial chalice of Hagia Sophia, commissioned for the dedication of the cathedral in 537 A.D., current estimated value, $22 million. More gasps. Phones came out across the room, recording everything. Patricia Bradley looked like she was having a medical emergency. The golden palm frond of imperial triumph carried in the victory parades of Constantinople. $15 million. By the fourth piece, people were standing up to get better views. By the fifth, hotel security had quietly sealed the exits to prevent theft. The briefcase that Patricia Bradley had assumed contained a refugee's meager possessions held more wealth than most of these guests would see in their lifetimes. "Total collection value," I announced, $89 million, give or take a few million, depending on market conditions. The silence was absolute. 300 people holding their breath, trying to process what they were seeing. Ethan finally found his voice. "That's impossible. You work at a falafel shop, you live in Queens, you wear thrift store clothes." "I do work at a falafel shop. It's excellent cover for a man who needs to observe people's true character without the distraction of wealth. I do live in Queens, in a modest apartment that costs me $800 a month. And yes, I wear thrift store clothes because they help me blend in with what people expect to see." I walked closer to the head table where the Bradley family sat frozen in horror. "You see, Mrs. Bradley, when you flee a war zone, you learn to be very careful about who you trust. You learn to watch how people treat you when they think you have nothing. It's quite revealing." Dr. Elizabeth Morrison from the Metropolitan Museum entered the ballroom right on schedule, flanked by 2 assistants carrying authentication equipment. The crowd parted as she approached the artifacts with professional reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Morrison announced, "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Chief Curator of Byzantine Art at the Metropolitan Museum. These pieces represent one of the most significant private collections of imperial Byzantine artifacts in existence. Each has been authenticated by our institution and independently verified by the Smithsonian." She began photographing each piece for documentation. "Mr. Hassan inherited this collection from his family, who were guardians of Byzantine heritage in Syria for over 6 centuries. When Damascus fell to violence, he managed to preserve these treasures from destruction." Patricia Bradley stood up shakily. "This is some kind of fraud. A setup. Refugees don't own million-dollar artifacts." "Actually, Mrs. Bradley," Dr. Morrison replied coolly, "many refugees are highly educated, successful people who've lost everything to war. Mr. Hassan was one of Damascus's most respected antiquities dealers before the conflict." I turned to address Patricia directly. "But you never asked about my background, did you? You saw a man with an accent wearing cheap clothes and decided you knew everything about me. We treated you kindly. We welcomed you into our home. You tolerated me. There's a difference. Should I play the recording of your conversation at the engagement party? The one where you called my family cultural baggage and wondered if Maya's children would be confused about their identity." Patricia's face went white. She'd forgotten about modern technology, about how easily conversations could be recorded and preserved. Sarah Chen from Meridian Strategic Communications entered the ballroom carrying her own briefcase full of documents. She'd been waiting in the hotel lobby for my signal. "Mrs. Bradley, since we're sharing family histories tonight, perhaps your guests would be interested in learning about yours." Sarah opened her folder and began reading from historical documents. The Bradley family fortune was built on government contracts during World War II. Specifically, Harrison Bradley, Patricia's great-grandfather, held contracts to build temporary housing for displaced persons camps. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. According to congressional records from 1947, Mr. Bradley was investigated for profiteering from refugee assistance programs. The Senate committee described his pricing as unconscionable gouging of desperate people fleeing war. Ethan looked stricken. "That's not relevant to tonight." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Your family built their wealth housing refugees, and now you're ashamed to associate with one." Sarah continued reading. In 1962, the Bradley Foundation received tax-exempt status as a charitable organization dedicated to providing humanitarian aid to displaced persons. However, their actual charitable giving to refugee assistance has been $0 over 60 years. "That's a lie," Patricia snapped. Sarah held up the tax documents. "Public records, Mrs. Bradley. Available to anyone who requests them." As Sarah presented the Bradley family's historical hypocrisy, phones throughout the ballroom were buzzing with incoming notifications. The hashtag Refugee Revenge was already trending on Twitter. Videos of the artifact reveal were spreading across Instagram and TikTok. Maya's college roommate, sitting at table 12, held up her phone. "Maya, this is everywhere. Your uncle's story is going viral." The first news notification appeared on CNN's website. "Refugee excluded from wedding reveals $89 million secret." The Washington Post followed minutes later. The Plaza Hotel scandal, when old money meets older money. Patricia Bradley's own phone was exploding with calls from her society friends, her charity board colleagues, reporters who'd gotten wind of the story. She declined call after call, but the damage was already spreading. "Ethan," she hissed, "do something. Stop this man from destroying our family." "What am I supposed to do, Mom?" "He owns Byzantine imperial artifacts. He's worth more than Dad's entire firm." That's when I played my final card. I walked to the microphone the band had been using for announcements. 300 guests watched as I prepared to address them directly. "Maya," I said, my voice carrying through the sound system, "you're about to make the most important decision of your life. Not about marriage. That choice is already made. About what kind of family you want to build." Maya stood at the head table in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face. "Uncle Yusuf, I don't understand." "I'm offering you a choice, Habibti. You can stay married to Ethan and build a life with someone whose family sees you as cultural baggage to be managed, or you can walk away from people who judge worth by accident of birth rather than strength of character." The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers. This wasn't just about money or artifacts anymore. This was about human dignity. "If you choose to stay with Ethan, I'll give you both my blessing and $5 million as a wedding gift. Consider it compensation for the years I let you think I was poor." I paused, letting that number sink in. "But if you choose to walk away from a family that's ashamed of yours, I'll give you something far more valuable. The knowledge that you put dignity before dollars, self-respect before social status." Ethan jumped up. "Maya, don't listen to him. This is emotional manipulation. We love each other." "Do you, Ethan?" I asked, "because love doesn't ask someone to be ashamed of their family. Love doesn't exclude people from the most important day of your life." I looked directly at Maya. "Your grandmother used to say, 'A man who is ashamed of your family today will be ashamed of you tomorrow.' Tonight, you get to choose whether that wisdom matters." Maya looked around the ballroom at 300 faces watching her personal crisis unfold. At Ethan, handsome in his tuxedo but weak in his convictions. At Patricia Bradley, who'd spent months trying to erase Maya's heritage from the wedding narrative. At her own parents, who'd flown from California hoping to celebrate their daughter's happiness. "Ethan," she said quietly, "when your mother said my family doesn't understand your world, what did you say?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Maya, we can discuss this privately." "No, I want everyone to hear your answer. When she said we were cultural baggage, did you defend us?" Silence. "When she said our children would be confused about their identity, did you tell her that was wrong?" More silence. When your friend Marcus said I wasn't worth the complications I'd bring to your life, did you disagree? Ethan's face reddened. I said I loved you. That's not the same thing as defending me. Maya walked to where I stood beside the Byzantine artifacts. Her wedding dress, bought with money she'd saved for 2 years, trailed behind her like a white river. Uncle Yusuf, you're right. About Ethan, about his family, about dignity being worth more than acceptance. She turned to face the crowd, 300 guests holding their breath. I spent months planning this wedding, trying to fit into a world that didn't want me, trying to make myself smaller so I wouldn't embarrass people who should have been proud to know me. Her voice grew stronger. But I come from a family of survivors, of fighters, of people who carried civilization itself across borders when empires fell. She began removing her engagement ring. Ethan, I can't marry someone who needs his mother's permission to respect my family. The ring hit the marble floor with a tiny sound that echoed through the silent ballroom. The Plaza Hotel ballroom cleared in 20 minutes. Not gradually, not with polite farewells, but like a fire evacuation. The Bradley family's social humiliation was complete and public. Patricia Bradley left through the service entrance to avoid photographers. Ethan's Princeton friends scattered, already calling their own wives to discuss the scandal. The society reporters who'd come to cover a wedding instead got the story of the year. Maya and I sat alone at the head table, surrounded by $89 million in Byzantine artifacts and the ruins of what was supposed to be her perfect day. "Are you angry with me?" I asked. "For testing Ethan? For revealing who he really was? For saving me from a marriage that would have made me ashamed of myself?" She laughed through her tears. "I'm grateful. The money. Uncle, I've been rich my whole life. I just didn't know it." "What do you mean?" "I had a family that loved me. That protected me. That sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. I was rich in ways the Bradleys never understood." 6 months later, Maya started the Hassan Foundation for Refugee Education, funded with $10 million from my collection. She married Dr. Ahmed Khalil, a Syrian-American cardiologist who'd also fled Damascus as a child. Their wedding was held in our family's mosque in Queens, surrounded by people who knew the value of loyalty over luxury. Patricia Bradley's charitable foundation lost its tax-exempt status after the IRS investigated their failure to provide actual refugee assistance. The scandal destroyed her social standing in Manhattan's elite circles. Ethan married his college girlfriend 8 months later. I sent them a wedding gift, a book about Byzantine history, with a note reading, "For when you're ready to learn about real civilization." The remaining Byzantine pieces now live in the Metropolitan Museum on permanent loan from the Hassan collection. Millions of visitors see them each year, learning about an empire that welcomed scholars and artists from every culture, every religion, every background. The placard beside the Empress Theodora pendant reads, "Donated by the Hassan family, guardians of Byzantine heritage for over 6 centuries." A reminder that civilization survives through the courage of those who carry it across borders. I still work at the falafel shop sometimes, not because I need the money, but because I enjoy the work, the conversations, the reminder that dignity isn't measured in dollars. Maya visits every Sunday for dinner. She brings her children, 2 beautiful kids who speak Arabic and English with equal fluency. They know their history, their heritage, their worth. Sometimes the quiet person in the corner has more power than anyone realizes. And sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones worth teaching. Did you enjoy this story? Share it if you believe everyone deserves dignity, regardless of where they come from. And remember, never underestimate the refugee with the old suitcase. You never know what treasures they're carrying.